Today's webinar is going to be on CPM scheduling with Primavera Unifier, presented by McNatty. Just a few housekeeping items to go through before we begin. We're going to mute all calls in order to preserve the quality of the audio. Any questions that you have during this webinar, there's a questions box. You could put your questions in there, time permitting. At the end, Don will try to answer those. If he doesn't get through those, we will send out the answer and question log either today or tomorrow. And the follow-up, you will receive the Excel file listing all the questions and responses along with a link of the recorded webinar. At this point, I'll give it over to you, Don.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. We've got pretty good attendance this morning. I guess all you have to do is talk about scheduling, and the number of people that show up to the tech webinars pretty much doubles. For those of you unfamiliar with what we do, this is all the marketing you'll get. This is our 25th year. We started in 1989 to focus on implementing Primavera systems for our clients, and we've been doing that now for 25 years. In 2006, we added hosting through our wholly owned affiliate MLM Project Services, and we host most anything that our clients have come to us with from global data centers. So, what are we talking about today? Well, Primavera Unifier has a built-in scheduling module, and a number of people have come to us and said, well, if we've got Unifier deployed, should we still be using P6, or can we just do scheduling within Unifier? And so that's the reason why we decided to do a tech webinar on this. We decided to do somewhat of a deep dive into the scheduling capabilities of Unifier, and then come back and tell you guys what we found, how it works, and what we think that you can do with it. That's the purpose of our tech webinars. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about our Unifier Webinar Series, which started last August. A brief overview of Primavera Unifier. Many of you have been on previous Unifier webinars, and we've gone over in detail what it does, how it compares to contract management, and we also did a P6 integration one in December. I want to talk about the fundamentals of the scheduling module itself within Unifier and the process that I went through to create a critical path schedule in Unifier. And then I'm going to tell you my perspective on what I found. And I'm going to do a little bit of a refresher on the integration that we did in December with P6, because ultimately I think that we still do want to be using P6 if we're doing true CPM schedules especially. And we'll discuss that in the best practice recommendation. So here's our previous technical webinar starting last August. All of those webinars are available off of our website on the Resources tab, Webinars. There's also PDFs, pass-outs of the information. And of course, if you want any additional information about any of these, please don't hesitate to email or call us. Let's put Unifier into perspective as to how Oracle sees it fitting in to the Primavera environment. Okay, their perspective is that P6 and Unifier are going to become one full project control solution, a platform. And on the left side here, we can see the in red all of the P6 functionality. We've got some functionality that's kind of split between P6 and Unifier, and then there's functionality over here on the right under Unifier, which is strictly done in Unifier. So Unifier, with its cost breakdown structure, which by the way it still refers to as a WBS, but in Primavera parlance, the Unifier WBS is referred to as a CBS, or cost breakdown structure. And the WBS in P6 is referred to as the WBS. These are things that they're going to get in better sync as we move forward with future versions of both modules. So what is Primavera Unifier? Well, it's cloud-based, so you're accessing it through the web. You might use the SaaS model where you just pay for it per user per month from Oracle, or you can purchase the software, deploy it yourself, or have a third party like MLM does host it for you. It has a lot of built-in functionality. There's some functionality that they've added onto it. I've got the documents log highlighted right here, and on the right side of the screen I can see a list of folders for my document manager log. These are user-defined. What you see here is set up based on the prepackaged modules that are currently available from Primavera, but you can, in fact, change these to fit your own needs, and they are hierarchical, so you can drill down and have multiple folders within a folder. Now down below you see project delivery and cost controls. These are business processes. Business processes are at the heart of Unifier. These business processes may generate documents or collect attachments as you execute them, stores them within various folders within Document Manager as long as you tell it to in your business process. Okay, these business processes are essentially user-defined. What we see here is what comes with the prepackaged modules that Primavera is providing now with Unifier, but you can modify these and change them as you need to do. This is a workflow, just a sample of a very, very simple workflow within Unifier. So you've got full document management with configurable folder structure on a foundation of configurable business processes that can be automated based on your own business rules. So as compared to contract management in the past, we now have a full document management system, and we have configurable and automated business processes. Setting up these workflows is a big part of your implementation. Users of Unifier don't usually go through menus and logs in order to get to documents the way that we've always done it with contract management, but at different steps of the business process, they'll interact with forms that are created based on what that user needs to do at this particular point in the business process. So based on that, the user interface has just the information this user needs to see, asking the questions that this particular user has to answer. So we've got some details about the form, we've got an action section, and then we've got line items that can be added, including tabs of line items that can be added to this as the business process goes through its workflow. And the biggest thing here for most of our clients is that it maintains a complete audit trail of all edits and changes, so I can clearly see who made what change and when, which is something that's been missing for quite a few years from the contract management tool especially. So these are the pre-configured packages that are available from Primavera. 9.14 is the most recent, posted on Oracle eDelivery in December of 2013. I'm sorry, that's a typo right there. The capital project and program management is the primary tool that we're dealing with, focused on delivery of construction projects. The scheduling module is contained within the Unifier cost controls module, and we're going to be reviewing the prepackaged or out-of-the-box, if you will, scheduling functionality that's included in Primavera cost controls. Now, just to kind of recap what Unifier is, business processes and the workflows that drive them, this is the foundation of Unifier. So a business process could create original documents or gather attachments and then post them in the document management log, which keeps track of versions, who looks at it. You can also this is what's included in the cost control pre-configured package. So the administrator creates the schedule sheet template within Unifier. You can have multiple schedule sheets, but only one is the master. And you do need to be careful here, because once you define a schedule sheet as a master, there's no going back. You can't delete it. You can't change it to another one. The master sheet integrates with other modules within Unifier. And so the cash flow requires the integration between schedule and cost sheets. The schedule sheet in Unifier does support adding activities, durations, relationships. It does indicate a critical path. It also supports importing schedules that may have been created in P6, Microsoft Project, or even Excel using a CSV file. Now here's the process that we go through to create a schedule sheet. So I'm in a project here, a school edition project. And I go down and I open up Schedule Manager and go to Schedule Sheets, and then I click on New to create a new schedule sheet. Okay, there can be multiple sheets, but only one can be the master. If you integrate with P6, you can actually integrate into any of the schedule sheets, but only the master is going to integrate with cash flow or with the cost sheet to create cash flow, unless you write some custom code to do it otherwise. So when the schedule sheet is first created, I've got just a very basic schedule sheet. I've got my table on the left. My Gantt chart is shown on the right. I've got some commands up here so I can add and delete activities. I can indent and outdent. Here I've got the Gantt or the bar chart displayed. If I click on progress, then the bar chart display gets replaced by a window that lets me define the progress for whatever activity I've selected on the left side of the screen. I can change these columns. I can add to them, and I'll show you a little bit of detail on that in just a minute. I did not see any capability to save these as layouts to be able to be called up and reused, but different schedule sheets could almost be like different layouts. although they don't necessarily all have the same content. I can zoom in and out on my timeline, and there's a button here for focus, and how that works is whatever activity I've selected in my table, when I click on focus, it just moves the bar just to the right. The time scale goes right to that particular activity. Kind of like double clicking on the bar chart in P6. So when I set up my schedule, I'm setting up my schedule sheet properties, starting with general information such as a title. I can add a description. I can define it as the master sheet or not. A schedule sheet can be active or inactive, which may have some impact on whether it gets accessed in a business process. Auto control appears to be don't worry, be happy statusing, whereas time moves forward. It just takes your early and late dates to calculate where the schedule is. I'm sure a lot of people will appreciate that. I can have one calendar per project. That calendar right here, I'm just using the default. I put a manual start date in, and there's some security permissions that I can also set up here. On the Gantt chart, I can define 3 different spots, top, left, and right, information that appears on the Gantt chart. My tracking Gantt, which is like a target bar, I can define what shows up on those bars, the text on those bars. Very similar to doing a layout within P6. I've got some options to auto-update activity status based on actual start and finish dates. That's probably a scary one. Activity progress requires an actual start date, so that to me is a good one, that I force an actual start date on an activity. In here you've got an option to enforce 100% complete against an actual finish date. Now I know over the years in P6 we've had people that want to define an activity as complete, but they don't want to put 100% on it. They want to carry something else. So that's an interesting aspect right there. And here, schedule refresh, there's not a lot of documentation on this. A lot of what you learn is really experimentation. The reason is probably because all of this has been developed by someone else on some previous project. It's now included in the pre-configured packages, and the level of documentation varies for a lot of the content. So here's my first pass at a very simple schedule. All I did was put in a few activities, some logic ties, and I wanted to keep it simple just for demonstration purposes. Now, what's interesting here is when I added an activity, it automatically gave it an ID. And then when I added another activity, it changed that ID and gave the next activity a different ID. So I'm not quite sure of the algorithm that's used here, but notice to proceed was in fact my very first activity, and it ended up being numbered as the last activity. I tried to see some pattern to what it was doing, but it's not entirely obvious to me what it is. I could not click on any of these, even though it looks like I can click and change to a start sort or a finish sort, it didn't work. It's possible that we just didn't have it set up in our environment to properly work. But this is what I got. So the activities were automatically renumbered. Whatever the number was, that was the default sort. Milestones, if I defined an activity as a milestone, it does display as a diamond, even though I noticed that it has a one-day duration. If you look at submittals, that's start to start with the milestone, and mobilization is finish to start with the milestone. I did that on purpose just to see what would happen, and I can see that there's a one-day difference in when those start. So it's different than how P6 does it. As I entered relationships, and I could only add predecessors, so I had to be looking backwards as I was adding my logic here, it calculated automatically. This particular view that I got was pretty much it, no indication whether something is driving or non-driving. So I experimented with the display a little bit, and I went into the View menu, and I wanted to see critical path. Now, there was nothing that asked me if I wanted to calculate. It was all automatic. And when I told it critical path, everything highlighted in red, which I assumed to be the critical path. I could not find any details on the algorithm, whether it uses the same forward-backward pass as P6 or not. All I saw was that all of the activities display as red. So then I opened up a detail window on an individual activity, and at first glance I'm going, geez, my late dates are earlier than my early dates. I haven't even started and I've got negative float. But after exploring it a little bit, it's obvious to me that this form, which again was user created, it's just got the dates flip-flopped. So my early dates should be displayed up here. So it's really just the labels that are wrong. The only real issue I have is I obviously have some float here, but it gives me a float value of 0. It's entirely possible there's another process that we have to go through in order to calculate the float, but it wasn't immediately obvious as to what that would be or how I would do it. Now, as far as putting in actual dates, the default template in Unifier does give me a column for actual start, actual finishes. And if I click on that, it opens up a little calendar, which makes it real easy to be able to plug in my actual dates. And as soon as I do that, it will recalculate. Now, if I want to change the columns, I can also do that by clicking on the columns up on top, and that opens up a dialog box that lists the columns. Obviously, I can turn them on or off, move them up or down. Another thing to remember about Unifier is you see these data sources. You can add columns, you can add data sources, what we might think of as custom fields, but that's part of how Unifier works, where you define the fields that you want included. Now, if I wanted to add columns to this, I just click on this new button right here, and that opens up a columns properties window, and I went to the data source, and I can see that there's a lot of additional columns that are already out here. And of course, I wanted to see float, so I found the float column and selected that to be included. And so now in my layout, I can see float. And of course, I still have a little bit of a problem here because I purposely built this field work, mobilization, clearing, trenching. I purposely built some float into it just to see if it would calculate it and how it would present it. Now, this very same schedule loaded in P6, what I did is I just took the same activity numbers, descriptions, and I manually added them in P6 with the same IDs. My submittal approval milestone, in order to get P6 to calculate in the same way as Unifier, I actually had to make that a one-day duration activity instead of a milestone to get the same dates. And as you can see here, P6 displays float values, also displays a critical path based on a traditional way that I wanted to do it. And of course, it's real easy to get my early start sort in there. Same schedule in P6 EPPM, or the web tool. Here I can see I've also got my late dates shown here. so I can clearly see that I do have some float on some of these activities. This is going across a weekend, so the 4-day difference ends up being 2 days on a 5-day work week calendar. You'll also notice in EPPM I've got what's called the CBS column. In P6, when I connect to Unifier, I can then display the cost breakdown structure, or the Unifier WBS, to be able to link my P6 schedule to Unifier costs. And I'm going to, in the next section, I'll revisit some of what we did in December with the Unifier P6 integration and show you how that works. So here's my perspective on CPM schedules in Unifier. Okay. Initially, I thought some calculations were incorrect, but all it was really the way that the screen form was presented. The label was wrong. A field was not properly positioned. We could go into UDesigner and fix that fairly easily. You can build bar charts fairly simply in Unifier just using activities and relationships. You know, it's a very simple way. If you just want to drive cash flow, you don't need a critical path schedule because, in my opinion, Unifier does not create a true critical path schedule. But a bar chart to drive cash flow, this is a simple way of doing it. Okay, it gives you everything you need. You can easily connect to the cost sheets and avoid having an external schedule. But you can, from my perspective, you can have the best of both worlds by using P6, allocating Unifier costs, and then sending that information back to Unifier so that your Unifier cost sheet or your cash flow is driven by a P6 schedule. There's some other integration capabilities here. You can create a list of activities in Excel and import them using a CSV format. You can use the Microsoft Project MPP format, the Primavera XML, but there's a built-in integration that you just have to build. I'll show you how to do the data mapping shortly. And then there's a Microsoft Project SML capability that we have not tested. Now, just to review a slide that we had used in the December presentation on P6 Unifier integration. This is based on 8.3.1 and Unifier 9.13. That's what was available to us when we put together this presentation. There's a new version of P6, 8.3.2, which includes some additional Unifier integration. You'll notice that I show EPPM sending information to Unifier. I can also both set up and send information from P6 Pro. Okay, so in P6 I can see the Unifier WBS code, which P6 calls the CBS. I can see it. It's not bringing any cost information over. All I'm doing is relating an activity to a CBS code in Unifier. P6 can then send activity information, dates, percentages. You can drive earned value in Unifier from P6. If you're going to do some serious summary level earned value, you're going to have to write some custom code to do it. But we find that there's a lot in Unifier that requires custom programming to make it do exactly what we want it to do. So in this case here, we've got the platform of P6 and Unifier, schedule information coming out of P6, cost earned value coming out of Unifier. Here's how the integration process works with P6. You first prepare for integration in Unifier, set it up in P6 EPPM, although with the recent release of 8.3.2 as a service pack, you can now do your setup with P6 Pro as well. You link your P6 activities to the cost breakdown structure, send it to Unifier, and then do your reports or your cash flow diagram, whatever you would like to do. So I start out by setting up my schedule sheet in Unifier. We've been through how to create that before. And next we're going to go into File in Data Mapping. We have to define our data mapping between Unifier and P6. And I'm going to add it, call it P6 Integration. And here's a list of fields. Now this is the default integration that they provide within the documentation with 9.13. So these are all of the columns. So I set this up exactly as they wanted it set up in the documentation provided. I have to set up properties. So in this case, I'll merge into an existing schedule. I've got some options to delete or overwrite. Select what it is that I want to bring in. The primary data elements. The other thing that I need to do while in Unifier is I need to go to my company workspace, be in the administration mode, and on the very top here, I go into my, I do a file open of the properties. So I need to see my company properties. And there's a few things that I'm going to need to put into P6 to make this work. So here I need the URL, which is just through the .com. I don't need any of the others. I need to know what's defined as the company short name, and I need the authentication key, which is always blank. So you need to get with your system administrator to find out what that authentication key was. So then I went into EPPM, and I went into Administer Application Settings, and on the General tab, there's a section there called Primavera Unifier. Now this is also now available in 8.3.2 for P6 Pro. And here is where I enter in the information that I got from the Unifier administration screen to tell me, the location on the web for the URL, and then the company name and a passcode to actually get in. So that's the primary things that are needed to set up the administration. Then I go into my activities screen in P6. In this case, I'm in EPPM, but I could be using Pro. Here's my cost breakdown structure. When I click in that column, I'll get a dialog box that lets me drill down through the hierarchy of my Unifier WBS to associate an activity with one cost code. You'll notice that I actually have the same cost code on multiple activities. So next, once I've done the allocation, from the activity screen in EPPM, I go to Actions, Import, Export, and I tell it to send to Primavera Unifier. And when I go back into Unifier, I can see that P6 has populated the dates. I had set up a new schedule sheet called P6 Schedule Sheet. just to receive my P6 information. I was pleasantly surprised to see that my activities were now renumbered in somewhat of a sequence to give me a nice flow on my bar chart here. I did find that the only thing that's coming across on this is the activity name in the early dates. The logic didn't come over, although I could have set that to happen. In the float value didn't come over. And I don't want to calculate anything here because I have the P6 dates exactly as they came from P6. I also had set this up as my master schedule, my P6 schedule sheets, so that I could do an integration with my cash flow. So in this case here, my schedule sheet, I actually did a couple of more rounds of this where I added more activities and distributed about half of the budget, and it just kept updating or overwriting this as I did it. So kind of a nice routine where you can always have the current schedule driving the cash flow. And then you can keep copies of it for various versions of your schedule. So here's the cash flow that I created. Actually, LimTan created it for me. Using my P6 dates, you can see that there's an unassigned value which could be turned off. And I've got just one bar here for baselines. Now I could go through and do additional schedules. I can export, import dates for different curves. I can define my spends from Unifier. I can use Unifier business processes to develop other curves or bring in other P6 dates to do those curves. So integration observations. Well, I did this because, in my opinion, Unifier does not do an adequate critical path schedule. It does an adequate bar chart to drive cash flow, and if that's all you need, then that's all you need. You don't need to do P6. But if you want Unifier to be driven by what I consider to be a better schedule, then you would use integration. The steps are straightforward. All I did was I went to the video from LimTan, who's one of our certified Unifier consultants. Did a presentation in December on the P6 integration, pulled up his steps, and I was able to do them with no help at all. As I mentioned, I used EPPM or the web to send to Unifier, but I could have used Pro. I did find out in a recent release yesterday or the day before that 8.3.2 now lets me do the setup in P6 Pro. Costs do not import to P6. I can only link an activity to a CBS code so that once the information is in Unifier, then I've got my distribution for cost. A Unifier cost code can be assigned to multiple activities in P6, and then what you would have to do in Unifier is allocate, probably on a percentage basis, what the distribution of that cost is. A single activity in P6 can have only one Unifier cost code. This is an important one because you may have to define your P6 schedule at a lower level of detail because you only have a one-to-one relationship with cost codes. And then, of course, we can send, in addition to the cost code allocation, we can send earned value or resource amounts and actually different cost amounts if your P6 schedule happens to be cost loaded as well. My best practice recommendation: Unifier is an excellent environment to manage funding, estimates, budgets, commitments, spends, forecast earned value, whatever it is from a cost perspective. There's no need to go to any other third-party tool to do this anymore. You've got a very robust cost management system. P6, scheduling system. I mean, Here I can do a true critical path schedule for my planning, my baselines, my current schedules, forecast. I can use it to drive my earned value percentages in units. And because it's very easy to access the information in both databases, it's very easy to do integrated cost and schedule and earned value reporting through integrated reporting, which will be, I know we did a webinar on that the middle of last year. If you got the current version of our newsletter, The Loop, there's a presentation in there that was given by John Blodgett and Brian Criss at the Western Winter Workshop a week and a half ago on integrated cost reporting that I think you'll find very useful to review. Here's a comparison chart that's been around for a long time comparing functionality of P6 EPPM and Pro. And you can see we're pretty close on those. And so I added in Unifier, so we can see that there's a lot of blanks in Unifier. Some things that we can do, okay, but you know it's not going to do a critical path schedule. I'm not sure where the float calculations come from, but it would preclude me from recommending it for that level of schedule. Now, because everything in Unifier can be customized, it would be possible for us to write code that would allow us to do that in Unifier. However, you know, Oracle's made it obvious that they see P6 and Unifier coming together as one platform. So in the future, and we'll probably see the scheduling sheet be nothing more than a repository of P6 information anyway. So I don't think I'd get too attached to the schedule sheet in Unifier except for simple cash flows. Okay, we've got a couple of questions. It says, are there any preferred or proven successful estimating tools available that integrate more effectively with Unifier? You know, we've done imports of estimates into the Unifier cost log using CSV files. So you know, there's nothing built that has a built-in integration with Unifier the way that P6 does. But if you can get the information into a spreadsheet or a CSV file, I found the import from an estimating system in the Unifier to be actually pretty simple. ID default numbering sort of looks like Microsoft Project. Well, you know, yeah, I kind of thought that, and I know Microsoft Project, if I insert activities, it'll change the ID, but it actually went a little further than that, in that every time I added an activity, it changed it, but not all the time. So I'm not quite sure what was behind that. I'm sure there's probably some other questions that will come along. Oh, here's a couple more one more question. Can Unifier scheduling module do baseline variance analysis and importation of Primavera Professional without going through the web version? Yes, I think I said a couple of times that P6 Pro will also send information, schedule information into Unifier. So whether I can do the variance analysis and everything in Unifier, yes, because as long as the data's there, you've got snapshots, you can write reports that are going to do your variance analysis. And I can send P6 schedule information to Unifier from either EPPM or P6 Pro. Any other questions that come in, we will put into the Excel worksheet that we send around. There's some upcoming events that we want to make sure that you're aware of. April, second week of April is Collaborate 14. This is the Oracle user groups meeting. This is supposed to take the place of the traditional Primavera user conference. There are quite a few presentations there. This is actually a 5-day long event in Las Vegas. If you're interested, just Google Collaborate 14 and you can get a lot of information there. First week of May, the Construction Management Association has a capital project symposium in Baltimore. And then, of course, in the middle of June is the annual AACE meeting in New Orleans. I just got back from the first annual AACE Northeast Symposium in Philadelphia last week. And our team helped to put that together with AACE. It was the first Northeast conference for AACE in Philadelphia. We had 105 attendees. It was a great conference, and it'll go on again next year. And of course, the annual meeting in New Orleans, you're talking a much higher level of information that's really focused on project controls, scheduling, claims, document management. So take a look at that. It's in New Orleans in mid-June. So our team will be there. We hope to see you there. Our newsletter, The Loop, went out yesterday. We call it The Loop because we're trying to keep you in the loop. So we try to pass on the latest information as we have it and try to share information of things that we have put together to help you use the tools that you use in project controls. So we're ending up a little bit early this time. I want to thank everybody for showing up, and if you have questions, either put them in through the what we have on screen for submitting questions, or just send an email to don@drmcnatty.com and we'll make sure that those questions get answered. So thanks again, and next month I'm going to talk about migrating from P6 6 or 7 to 8.3 in the various issues that you want to take into consideration when doing that. The abstract and the details of next month's technical webinar are in the Loop, which if you're not on the distribution list, you can go to our website, click on News, and get the latest copy of it. So hope to see you next month. Thank you.